Welcome to Ambassadors in the Marketplace, the podcast where faith meets the workplace. Here, we explore kingdom principles to help you thrive as an ambassador in the marketplace. Whether you're in business, education, media, government, or any industry, you have a divine assignment. Let's unlock wisdom, excellence, and influence for kingdom impact. Stay tuned. Hello everyone, good to see you again today, and welcome to today's episode, which is episode number 3 of our series. And the title for today is Divine Positioning, or if you want, Positioned for Impact. You were placed there for a reason. So what do you think is the reason for your current job, your current industry, profession, or role? Is it just a career choice to gain status, to earn an income, to pay the bills, important as they are? Or could it be divine positioning? Today, we'll explore how Esther and Nehemiah discovered that they were strategically placed in their respective environments and positions for kingdom impact. If you've ever wondered if your work really mattered to God, or whether it fits within God's agenda, then stay tuned. This episode is for you. So let's start with Esther's divine assignment, which was she was called for such a time as this. Esther chapter 4 verse 14 says, "If you remain silent at this time, relief and deliverance for the Jews will arise from another place, but you and your father's family will perish. And who knows, but that you have come to your royal position for such a time as this." Esther was an orphan who was raised by her cousin Mordecai, and they had no royal background. Yet, God placed her in the palace, not for personal luxury, which would have been in abundance in the palace. Rather, the purpose was to ultimately rescue her people from destruction. When the Jews were threatened with genocide, she had to choose either to stay silent or step up and do something about it at great personal risk to fulfill her God-given assignment. Initially, Esther hesitated for fear of losing her life. That is natural. It is a natural human response. However, with corporate prayer and fasting, she overcame her fears and inhibitions, and God came through for her and her people. How often do we hesitate when called upon to act? Sometimes we think it's not my responsibility, or I'm not significant enough to make a difference. For example, you might think, I'm married to a high-profile person, as Esther was. What if, like Esther, you were positioned by God in your current work or professional environment for a purpose bigger than yourself? Majority of us will not become queens like Esther, but your workplace is your palace. Many Christians separate work from faith, or they separate their faith from work, assuming that only pastors and missionaries or ministers are called. Further, our current culture directly discourages expression of faith in the public sphere. However, every believer is called, whether in business, in media, in health, government, or education. Wherever we are, we can apply our kingdom values and principles, and when appropriate, take a stand, as Esther did. You may not realize it, but your job could be a divine assignment. The question you should ponder is this: what if your office, your business, or career is your palace? A place where God has positioned you to bring about change, influence, or even help a specific, or you can say a single individual, whether they are senior or junior to you in the job hierarchy. Loving this conversation? Don't forget to like and subscribe to Ambassadors in the Marketplace and share this episode with fellow Kingdom professionals. For more resources and community discussions, visit marketplaceambassadors.com and our Facebook page. Let's build a legacy of faith-driven excellence together. Next, let's take a look at Nehemiah's divine positioning. He was the cupbearer who rebuilt a nation. Nehemiah chapter 1 verse 11 says, "I was cupbearer to the king." Nehemiah's story is that of someone who went from serving a king to serving and restoring a whole nation. Nehemiah wasn't a priest or a prophet. He was not even a very high-ranking government official like Daniel or Joseph. He was a cupbearer, a royal official responsible for the king's wine. But that was a very important role because he bore heavy responsibility in keeping the king safe from poisoning and was also physically close to the king always. When Nehemiah heard about Jerusalem's ruined walls, he was deeply burdened to act. But he was not a builder, he was not a governor or military leader. He was just in a Persian palace. You may feel unqualified for what God is stirring in your heart. But Nehemiah reminds us, God does not call the qualified, He qualifies the called. This is really, really important. How did Nehemiah use his position? Instead of waiting for a miracle, he leveraged his access to the king. He prayed for favor and then boldly requested resources. The king granted his request, and Nehemiah led the reconstruction of Jerusalem's walls. Nehemiah's role as a cupbearer wasn't random. It was strategic, because without it, he wouldn't have had direct access to the king and the subsequent support which the king provided to him. So what doors has God already opened for you that you haven't stepped through yet? Interestingly, it was the king who noticed the change in Nehemiah's demeanor and initiated the conversation by asking what the problem was. Clearly, his consistent loyalty to the king and serving with joy and gladness even as a servant enabled the king and the ruler to notice his sadness. It is a fundamental mistake for Christians to view our managers, our bosses, and those who work above us as enemies, because they may not be believers like us. That is not the point. Because God is sovereign and uses whoever He pleases. The common thread in the stories of Esther and Nehemiah is that we should recognize our assignment. Both Esther and Nehemiah show us that your position is not an accident. God placed you there for a reason. Your role may seem small, but it can have a kingdom, and I would add a generational impact. Courage and action are required to fulfill your divine assignment. Do you see your job as a calling or just a paycheck? What if your skills and influence are meant for something bigger than you realize. And so, as we finish, let's look at a real-life scenario of a Christian chief executive officer who advocates for workplace integrity. So imagine this Christian business executive in a company where fraud and unethical practices are common. Instead of looking away, he or she takes a stand, proposing new policies for transparency. Now, it's risky and they face resistance, but over time, the company changes for the better. Like Esther and Nehemiah, this person realized they weren't just there to make a living, but they were there to be light in the darkness. And so this week, take 10 minutes to reflect on your current job or position and ask yourself the following 3 questions. What influence has God given me where I am? What injustice, problem, or need do I feel burdened about? And lastly, what step can I take this week to make a difference? The take-home message from this episode is that God positions us where we are for a purpose. And so identify yours and step into it boldly. God richly bless you. Thank you for joining us on Ambassadors in the Marketplace. Remember, excellence is a kingdom mandate. So stay faithful, stay diligent, and keep influencing your world for Christ. Until next time, stay excellent.